It begins, not with drama, but with quiet, a hush that slips in through the bare trees, gliding across the open fields, weaving between the worn stones of a village too old to remember its founding. There are no footsteps tonight, no carts, no horses. The road is frozen in place, just like everything else, and so here you are, here we are, standing at the edge of the cold dot. Welcome. This is a different kind of journey, not of battles or kings, but of slow breath and stubborn survival, of nights darker than pitch and fires more precious than gold. It's the story of the people, often forgotten, the medieval peasants who didn't command armies or build cathedrals, but who did something far harder. They endured the winter as you settle in, perhaps in your own quiet place, maybe with a soft hum in the background or the slow swirl of a fan. Know that this time we'll drift together. No pressure, no rush, just the hush of history unfolding gently around us. Let your thoughts wander, let your breath slow. You can always return here. There's always more story to share, more quiet nights to slip into. The fire never quite goes out, and the doors always ajar. Now, back to the village. The moon tonight is full, though it hides shyly behind a gauze of mist. Its glow glistens on frozen thatch rooftops and the crooked wooden fences that lean with age, not disrepair. Each house is a breath away from the next, huddled close, as if the buildings themselves are trying to stay warm. The air is motionless. It presses in, not heavy, but still. The kind of stillness that makes your ears notice the small things, the soft creak of wood settling, the faint shift of straw, the muffled sound of a chicken adjusting in its sleep. It's deep winter in the medieval countryside, the time when night comes too early and morning too late, a time not ruled by clocks but by cold and courage. We begin on the edge of the village, where a narrow footpath leads past a dry well and a sleeping cowshed. The mud here has frozen solid, its usual muck now turned to a crust of white and brown ridges. No footprints mark it. No one ventures out unless they must. In this world, stepping outside at night in winter could be a gamble with your life, but we are only visitors, and so we glide gently between the homes, listening, not disturbing, watching the faintest orange glimmers blink through cracked shutters and hanging hides. Smoke curls upward from holes in the roof-snot chimneys, not really, just gaps that let the fire breath escape, carrying the warmth with it, and sometimes the stories too. Each home here tells one, not out loud, not always with words, but in the scratch of straw on wood, the clink of a pot cooling on the hearth, the sigh of a mother shifting her baby beneath layers of rough-spun cloth. We move toward one such home, small as they all are, but sturdy in its own tired way. Its roof is thick with thatch, and patched in places with extra bundles of rushes and dried moss. The walls are of wattle and daub-woven sticks, sealed with a pasty mix of mud, straw, and animal dung. Not pretty, not sweet-smelling, but surprisingly strong, and warmer than nothing. Inside, someone stirs. It's not a house like we know. Houses, there's no hallway, no kitchen, no bedchambers, just one room. One square of earth pressed smooth beneath feet that have walked it for generations. On the far wall, a small hearth glows faintly, like an ember pretending to sleep. Its smoke curls sluggishly toward a hole in the roof, reluctant to leave. The fire is the center of everything: warmth, light, safety, spirit. The family sleeps, not separately, not luxuriously, but close, very close. A father, a mother, two children, maybe a grandmother, all tangled together beneath heavy wool tunics and what rough blankets they've stitched from old rags. A straw mattress lies beneath them, flattened and rustling. With every small movement, it's not comfortable, but it's warmer than the floor. They're layered like a human puzzle, limbs draped, cloaks overlapping, faces buried beneath cloth. Even the family goat is inside, curled in one corner, a living hot water bottle with horns. Its breath rises like smoke, and the silence here is not empty, it's full, full of the long, slow rhythm of sleep, the occasional mumble, a cough, the fire sighing. You might notice the ceiling, how low it is. You could touch it without standing tall. And above it, the thatch crackles faintly in the cold, responding to the freeze. Somewhere up there, a squirrel or something close to one scurries to find shelter in the dry reeds. Its presence is known, but tolerated. There's no room to banish it. Everyone is surviving. The children sleep at the center, safest from drafts. The grandmother, small and quiet, lies near the wall, one thin blanket between her and the cold stones of the hearth. Her hands are tucked beneath her arms. She has learned not to dream, only to wait for morning. And yet there is peace here, because this is a home not built for comfort, but for survival. And survival is its own kind of warmth. There is pride in the endurance, quiet, simple pride in waking up every morning, toes intact, lungs still working, fire not quite dead. Outside, the wind has returned. It whispers first, like a curious spirit, then it tries, the walls prodding the cracks, lifting the corners of hides pinned to the tiny window hole. But the house holds firm. The gaps have been stuffed with moss, with rags, even with sheep grease in places. Anything to keep the night out, to keep the breath in. The stars blink faintly, above, behind, the mist. They see this same pattern across hundreds of villages, hundreds of homes, all sleeping, all breathing quietly beneath the weight of winter. This was life. This was how medieval peasants survived the coldest nights, not through heroics or miracles, but through layers, through huddles, through stubbornness and smoke, through the simple, stubborn act of staying where you are and letting the dark pass over you, without giving it permission to take anything. And as the wind picks up just a little, and the fire grumbles in response, the village sleeps on, safe. For now, together it's easy, in the modern world, to forget what it meant to be cold, real cold. The kind that didn't just nibble at the fingers or turn your nose red, but sank its teeth deep into the bones and stayed there, in this tiny medieval home. The cold is not a visitor, it's a resident, always present, always waiting, but still. The people who live here have made their peace with it, not by choice, by necessity. The room is dim, lit only by the dying orange glow from the hearth. Its light dances across the low walls, making the shadows stretch and tremble like memories. Each object in the room has a purpose. Nothing here is for decoration. Not the pots, not the hanging bundle of dried herbs above the fire, not the few carved wooden spoons and dull-bladed knives resting near a half-emptied bowl of porridge, gone. Thick with cold, near the center of the floor, beneath the sleeping family, lies the heart of their nightly ritual, patchwork of worn-out straw mats, flattened rushes, and faded wool layers. This is the bed. No frame, no feather stuffing, just a barely raised barrier between flesh and frost. The floor is made of earth, packed down over generations, smoothed by footsteps, hardened by winter. When it rains, water seeps up from below, curling into tiny pools. When it snows, the cold seeps up instead, as though the earth itself wishes to reach inside and remind everyone that comfort is a myth. But tonight it is only frozen, no water, just a faint white crust in the corners, glittering quietly in the light. The walls are rough to the touch, woven twigs and branches, daubed with a slurry of mud and hay and dung. Yes, dung, from cows, from pigs, whatever could be gathered. It was sticky, cheap, and always around. When smeared thick between the sticks, it formed an insulator, however meager, a defense, a prayer whispered in paste and straw. On one wall hangs a piece of faded linen, stitched long ago by a mother or grandmother. Its threads are loose, fraying, but the pattern is still there: simple flowers, geometric lines, the vague outline of a deer. Beauty in a place where beauty was often too expensive to afford. That cloth is more than cloth. It is memory. It is dignity, nailed to a cold wall. Above the hearth, a small shelf holds the family's rare treasures: a dried apple, a wooden figure of a bird, a candle stub, a smooth stone from the river that shines when it is wet. These are not riches, but they are valued. They are reminders of warmer days, kinder seasons. And then there's the smell. This is not the sterile cold of modern winter. No, here the air is thick, with smoke from the hearth drifting in slow ribbons across the ceiling, with the sour scent of wool that has never known soap, with the musk of animals, a goat, a dog, maybe a piglet curled in straw at the edge of the room, with the musk of straw that seemed too many months of being walked on, laid on, coughed into men, and beneath it all, the unmistakable trace of earth, wet, cold, unforgiving still. The home holds, and tonight it holds warmth to what little of it there is. The father lies closest to the fire, one hand outstretched toward the coals. His face is weathered, lined from years of wind and labor. Beside him, the mother has wrapped a child in her cloak, her body curved like a shield. Her eyes flutter beneath, their lids caught somewhere between dreams and vigilance. On the far end, the eldest child sleeps, curled in a ball, their feet pressed under the family dog for warmth. They've learned, all of them, how to sleep with the cold, to tuck their fingers into armpits, to press faces into the crooks of knees, to lie still, lest the small heat they've gathered escape into the air. And still, the fire fights. Its glow is faint now. The logs, half-burned, lie like exhausted sentinels. Occasionally, a pop breaks the silence, and a shower of sparks flickers against the sooty stones. The fire, too, is tired. The hearth is not a grand fireplace. It's a depression in the floor, ringed with stones blackened from decades of use. Above it, there's no chimney, just a hole in the roof. Smoke doesn't rise. Candlelit hesitates, swirls, sometimes sinks, sometimes escapes. At times, it lingers low, making everyone cough in their sleep. But it is accepted, because this is the cost of warmth. And the warmth is not just heat, it is togetherness. These people, this family, survive not because they've outwitted winter, but because they've clung to one another tightly enough to keep breathing through it. The warmth of one body feeding the next. No privacy, no silence, no softness, but a fierce, quiet bond that pushes back against the cold, night after night. Outside the walls, winter rules everything. It freezes water in the buckets. It turns breath into mist. It cracks wooden beams and bites the tips of every bare finger. It is vast, impersonal, ruthless. But here, inside these four drafty, dung-smudged walls, humanity pushes back, gently, repeatedly, like waves on a cliff. A single wool cloak passed from grandmother to daughter to granddaughter. A fire kindled with hope and flint. A whisper of a song hummed to a child beneath the blankets. A dog curled at your feet, twitching in sleep, dreaming of spring. This is not a place of luxury. It is a place of survival, and in its own way, that is beautiful. You can almost hear the whisper of old stories, passed from mouth to mouth, not written down, but stitched into the rhythm of life. Stories about the first winter in this home, or the winter where the snow reached the top of the door, or the winter someone saw a ghost out by the cowshed. These stories are not told tonight, but they hang in the air, waiting. In a far corner of the room, the grandmother shifts. She does not speak. Her breath rasps gently, catching at the end like an old bellows. She is wrapped in so many layers. She looks like a bundle of wool more than a woman. But she is awake now, just barely. Staring at the ceiling, she does not need light to see it. She knows every crack in the beams, every hollow where snow collects, every place where the wind sneaks in. She listens to it all, listens, and remembers she has lived through 50 winters, maybe more, and she knows this one will pass, just like the others. Some things do not change. The cold will come, the fire will fight, the family will sleep, and the morning will be a little closer, just not yet. By now, the village is deep in the belly of night. There's a strange kind of stillness that lives in the middle of a winter night, not silence exactly, but a hush that softens everything. Even the wind, which once bullied the trees and scolded the rooftops, has quieted into long, low moans that curl around the eaves like lullabies, too tired to sing. The snow, which began falling earlier in the evening, has coated the world beyond. The walls in a fresh quilt of silence. Inside the peasant home, the fire glows low, but not dead. The warmth it offers is thin and uneven, like a blanket fraying at the corners, but it's enough. Enough to keep the cold from becoming dangerous. Enough to keep the smallest fingers and toes from turning pale and numb. Now and then, someone stirs, not fully awake, but drifting to the edge of it. The father turns on his side, pressing closer to the child nearest him. The mother sighs and pulls a cloak higher over her shoulders. The goat snorts, adjusts its legs, and settles again. These movements are barely noticed. They're part of a ritual the family has performed for every night of every winter, layering, adjusting, shifting, a slow, shared choreography of survival. The night, for medieval peasants, wasn't just about sleep. It was about managing the cold. Before bed, layers were prepared like armor, not for battle, but for endurance. Wool tunics were doubled. Shawls became head wraps. Cloaks were wrapped twice around, their coarse fibers itching against the skin. But better than frostbite, There were no goose-down duvets here, no soft cotton sheets, just woof and scratchy, sometimes damp from yesterday's snow and hope. There was no such thing as a separate sleeping outfit. You wore what you had. Your clothes were your pajamas, your blanket, your armor against the cold that seeped through floorboards and straw. If you had 2 tunics, you wore them both. If you had 3, you were rich. Some families even rubbed sheep tallow or animal fat onto their skin before bed. It was a trick passed down through necessity. Grease helped trap body heat. It smelled, yes, and clung to your fingers long after you'd wiped them on rushes or your own cloak. But it worked. Then came the huddle. Peasants didn't sleep alone. Privacy was not a luxury they had, nor one they desired, especially in winter. Human warmth was currency. You slept beside your family, and if you didn't have a family, you found someone else, neighbors, friends, strangers. In hard times, warmth didn't ask questions. Children were placed in the middle, like treasures wrapped in bodies. The very old were given a spot near the fire if they could no longer regulate their own heat. The strong took the outer edges, acting as living shields against the cold drafts that clawed through every wall. And the livestock, well, they had their role too. The goat wasn't just inside the home because it was cute or because it was too cold for it in the barn. It was there because it gave off heat. So did chickens. So did dogs. On some nights, a pig might sleep on the same straw as the humans, snorting softly in its dreams and contributing to the living, breathing heat. Source that turned a death trap of a house into a just barely survivable nest. Everything was arranged with care. Not like luxury, but like strategy. A warm stone, heated earlier in the fire, might be wrapped in cloth and tucked under the straw mattress. A humble invention, perhaps the peasant world's answer to a hot water bottle. The warmth wouldn't last long, but for an hour or two it would make a difference. So would keeping the fire alive. That task fell to the last person to sleep and the first to wake. Coals were banked under ash to keep them from dying completely. A few were pulled into a small pile, covered just enough to glow, but not enough to spark. In the morning, they could be coaxed back into flame with dry straw and breath. If they failed, the house would begin the day cold, bone cold, and that made everything harder. There were other small rituals. Warming hands over the fire until the fingertips tingled, then tucking them beneath a sleeping child's back, replacing a damp patch of straw with a dry one if any could be found, whispering old prayers into the smoke, prayers not for miracles, but for breath and fire, and waking up with all your fingers intact. There was comfort, too, in the rhythm of it, the order in which garments were layered, the folding of a blanket in half before covering the legs, the way the eldest child always curled to the right, and the youngest always tucked their feet between someone's knees. These routines were like lullabies in motion, predictable, soothing, anchoring. No one spoke them aloud. They didn't need to. The body remembered what the tongue did. Occasionally there was a whisper, a mother humming an old folk tune, too quiet to name, a child murmuring in sleep about summer, about apples, about the way the sun once felt on their face. The words made no sense, but they were soft, and that was enough. The warmth in the room is uneven. Pockets of heat near the fire, cold in the corners, drafts that crawl down the spine like invisible fingers. But the home is holding, and the people within it are holding too. They know what the cold can do. They've seen the frostbite. They've lost friends to sleep that never ended. They've buried children wrapped in the same cloaks that once saved others. Winter was not a poetic inconvenience. It was a test, and one that didn't care who passed or failed. But still, they resisted, with layers, with closeness, with stubborn, unshakable nightly rituals that turned survival into a form of quiet strength. And so they slept, layered like onions, stacked like memories, dreaming of warmth, or simply dreaming of waking. Outside, the snow continues its gentle descent, whispering against the thatched roof like feathers brushing old skin. And in the distance, beyond the hills, a lone wolf calls not in hunger, but as a reminder, winter rules this land. But within these walls, humanity endures outside the little home. The snow falls with purpose now, not the tentative, fluttering flakes of early evening, but a steadier, surer kind of snow, the sort that settles and stays, the kind that makes no sound as it lands, and yet weighs the world down like a blanket of forgetfulness. Trees are bowed with it, fences groan under it. The thatched roofs bear its weight in silence, neither resisting nor welcoming, simply enduring. But inside, the cold has found its way in, not all at once, not like a door blown open or a window shattered. The cold is too clever for that. It creeps in through the seams, through the spaces where walls meet floor, where beams were hastily joined with raw wood and hope. It slinks through cracks, past gaps stuffed with moss and rags. It comes not in gusts, but in sighs, and the wind. Oh, the wind! It plays like a ghost through the village, not loud, not violent, but persistent. It finds the home's weak spots of which there are many and fingers its way through, brushing against the toes of sleeping children, slipping beneath the edges of cloaks, tickling the backs of necks. It's not strong enough to freeze, but it is strong enough to make the body shiver. And in winter, that's enough to steal sleep. Still, the home holds together, mostly. The walls are doing their best. Wattle and daub construction. That's what a historian would call it. The peasant who built it might have called it what we could manage. Sticks, interwoven like a basket, daubed thick with mud and dung, maybe a little straw to keep it all from crumbling. The mixture was slapped on by hand, pressed into every crack and space like clay in a child's sculpture. It worked, mostly, but only for a time now. In this deep winter night, you can see where the daub has shrunk, where it has cracked, pulled away from the wood with the shift of seasons. The wind knows these places well. It visits them nightly. Sometimes, when the wind blows just right, the fire flickers as if startled, and the people stir, not in panic, not in fear, but like ships adjusting to a shifting tide. Bodies roll closer together, arms fold tighter. A hand reaches for a missing blanket and finds a sibling instead. This is how they live with it. There is no such thing as a sealed house. No sanctuary that keeps the cold entirely out. So instead, they work around it. They stuff moss into cracks by day, jam old cloth into crevices near the floor, smear sheep grease on particularly drafty beams. Every winter brings new repairs, new improvisations. The wind accepts their efforts. It dances elsewhere, for now. The window, if it can be called that, is laughably small. A square hole in the wall, no bigger than your face. covered with scraped animal hide, stretched and dried like parchment made of survival. It lets in a faint, bluish light from the moonlit snow outside, and in the wind the hide shudders, just slightly, like a breath held too long. No glass, of course, that was for lords or for churches. Even the wealthier villagers might afford a tiny pane, smaller than a book, for decoration. But not here. Here, the hides or boards are enough. Just enough to keep out the worst of the cold, though never all of it. A draft sneaks through the window shutter and brushes against the youngest child's face. She stirs, lets out a little sigh, and nestles deeper against her mother's chest. Her mother shifts her arm, reflexively, wrapping the child tighter. They settle again. The wind watches the roof. Now that's another battle entirely. Thatch. A thick quilt of reeds and grasses, laid in bundles, secured with rope and wooden pegs. Beautiful from a distance, picturesque, but in winter it sags, it leaks, it crumbles. In the warmer months, the roof had been patched with bundles of dried rushes gathered from the marsh, dried in the sun. But the sun is a memory now, and the snow is patient. It gathers above the ceiling, presses down, waiting to find that one soft spot where the thatch has loosened, where the moisture has seeped through. A drop falls, then another dot, tiny, dark spots on the packed dirt floor. A rhythm, a warning. Someone will find it in the morning. They'll set a bucket beneath it, maybe stuff the hole with cloth, maybe climb onto the roof and press another layer of reeds over the top. Maybe they'll just move the bedding to a drier spot. Survival rarely comes with elegance, but for now, the leak is minor. The fire still flickers. The walls still stand, and the family, well, they've weathered worse. There's something about these people, these medieval peasants, something unspeakably resilient. They do not complain, not because they're immune to discomfort, but because complaining does nothing to warm the room. Their energy is spent on solutions, on the slow, persistent resistance of simply continuing. That resistance is visible in every corner of the home, in the patched-up shoes resting near the fire, stuffed with straw, in the bent wooden spoon that's been mended with wire and hope, in the rags pinned to the wall to stop a particularly ambitious draft, in the pile of firewood stacked carefully, guarded like treasure. It is visible in the faces of the sleeping family, to dot worn, yes, lined, yes, but not defeated. They've made peace with the wind and its games. They've accepted the cold as an adversary that can be endured, if not defeated. They sleep despite it, because of it, even. Sleep becomes a protest, a defiant act of rest in a world that would rather they shiver through the night outside. The wind circles the village once more. It pushes against shutters, nibbles at eaves, then sighs and continues on. It knows these walls won't fall tonight. There are easier prey elsewhere. And so the house sleeps again, quiet, drafty, determined in the stillness. The fire pops once. A small spark leaps upward, dances, and dies. It is well past midnight now. The moon, veiled behind thick clouds and drifting snow, lends the world a silvery hush. Inside the huddled home, time becomes a loose and blurry thing, measured not by hours or clocks, but by the rhythm of shivers, by the sigh of settling bodies, by the distant crow of a restless rooster who always gets the timing wrong. The family sleeps, but not all at once, and never deeply. This isn't the kind of rest that drapes over you like velvet. No, medieval sleep was often fragmented. Not one long stretch, but two smaller ones, divided by what people called first sleep and second sleep. They didn't have words like REM cycles or circadian rhythms, but their bodies knew. Somewhere between midnight and early morning, people would stir. Not fully awake, but not entirely asleep either. A space in between. A murky, soft-edged hour where the mind roamed free and the fire was checked. And maybe, if they were lucky, someone whispered a story. Tonight, the mother stirs first. Her eyes open slowly, adjusting to the deep blue gloom. She doesn't sit up. There's no need. She lies still, listening. The steady breathing of her children. The distant whistle of wind pushing through the cracks. The dull crackle of the fire, now no more than a scatter of glowing embers. It's a quiet night, a good one. Still, she knows what to do. With care, she lifts herself slowly, quietly. The woolen blanket clings to her like a second skin. She eases it off. Her joints protest. Her knees creak, but she says nothing. Instead, she crosses the room, kneels by the hearth, and begins the sacred ritual of waking the fire. She doesn't need light. She knows it by feel. The banked coals are still alive, barely. She brushes aside the ash with her fingers, exposing the dull orange glow beneath. She lays down dry straw, then breathes gently once, twice, 3 times. The embers stir. The straw catches. She adds a splinter of wood, then another. Slowly, tenderly, she builds the flame again. Not too high, just enough. Behind her, the family stirs, not all of them, just one child, then another. A cough, a murmur, a turn in the straw. Then stillness again. This in-between time, it is familiar. It's when the mind begins to wander, when dreams blur into thought, and thought becomes memory. People in this age understood this liminal space. They used it. Some would rise and say their prayers. Others would tell stories. A few might even sneak away to visit neighbors. Nothing about sleep was linear. In noble houses, this might be when scholars lit candles and studied manuscripts. In monasteries, monks would sing low hymns, their voices barely brushing the cold stone walls. But here, in this peasant home, there are no candles, no books, no Gregorian chants. Only breath, only warmth, only story. The mother returns to her place on the floor, wrapping the blanket around herself again. One of the children stirs beside her and mumbles something half-sensical. A word about birds, about feathers, about flying. A dream. Dreams, in this world, are more than entertainment. They're omens, messages, sometimes absurd, sometimes sacred, always noted. In the morning, someone will remember what they dreamed. Tell the others. Maybe they'll laugh. Maybe they'll wonder what it meant. Maybe they'll simply nod and say, best not to eat onions before bed. There is discomfort in their rest that is undeniable. The straw mattress pokes. The wool itches. The cold never entirely leaves. A stone beneath the shoulder blade. A damp patch under the knees. A sudden cramp in a curled leg. These are the companions of the night. Inescapable, intimate, but discomfort is not the same as misery. These people, these villagers, they are used to such things. They've slept this way since they were born. Their parents did too, and their parents before them. It's not something they lament. It's just life. Their bodies have learned how to rest, even when the floor is hard, even when the goat snores, even when the fire fades. They have made peace with it, and in a strange way, discomfort creates closeness, not just of bodies, but of hearts. There is something bonding about suffering gently together. A shared blanket, a shared sigh, a hand held beneath the covers, not because of love, but because it's warmer that way. Outside, the storm has paused, the clouds drift. A crack in them allows moonlight to reach the earth again. It spills across the white rooftops, across the empty lanes, and presses softly against the hide-covered window. Inside, it draws pale shadows on the wall long, quiet fingers of light that stretch and fade, and still the home breathes. The second sleep begins. Slowly, the family slips back into it. The mother's hand rests on her child's back. The father mutters in sleep, words lost to the cold. The fire whispers low. Even the wind seems to lose interest, retreating into the hills for now. There is something deeply human about it all. The way we seek rest, the way we surrender to dreams, the way we keep each other warm, not just with heat, but with presence. In a world so often shaped by hardship, the act of sleep becomes something sacred, a small, stubborn act of hope, as if to say, we will endure another day, but first we rest. And so, beneath the scratchy wool, on a bed of straw and stone and story, the peasants dream, not of castles, not of riches, but of summer, of apples ripening in the orchard, of streams no longer frozen, of fields green again, and that, perhaps, is warmth enough. The hearth is the soul of this home, not just a fire pit, not merely a source of warmth. It is the quiet, crackling companion that listens when everyone else sleeps. It knows the secrets of the house. It has heard every cough, every whispered prayer, every lullaby crooned half-heartedly into the straw as children drifted into slumber. Tonight, the hearth is still alive, though barely. The flames are no longer proud. They do not dance. They huddle low, coals cloaked in ash, pulsing faintly like the heart of an animal buried beneath snow. A single thin flame flickers at the edge, stretching upward before curling inward again, as if even fire grows weary in the depths of winter, and yet it endures. This fire was started long before night fell, perhaps even before dusk, when the last rays of sunlight draped themselves over the fields like farewell kisses. It took time. Flint, steel, dry twigs, and straw carefully coaxed into a flame, guarded with cupped hands, fed like a baby bird. When it finally caught, it was celebrated, not with cheers, but with the quiet nods of people who knew just how precious a fire could be. To let it die overnight would be to invite the cold to creep deeper, and so someone must always tend it. Tonight, it was the mother. On another night, it might be the father, or the grandmother, or the eldest child, learning the rhythm of logs and embers for the first time. Keeping a fire alive was more than a chore. It was a kind of trust, a night-long promise that the home would not freeze while its inhabitants slept. There is no chimney here, no flue. The smoke has no neat exit. It coils lazily upward, drifts across the low ceiling, and seeps out through gaps in the thatch or the occasional hole in the wall. The air is thick with it wood smoke, and memories mingled in the hush of midnight. Sometimes the smoke clings to skin, to wool, to hair. To memory. It is said that if you lived in a medieval peasant's home for long enough, you carried the scent of fire with you everywhere, into the fields, into the market, even into church, where no one commented because they all smelled the same. And it wasn't unpleasant, not to them. It was the smell of warmth, of meals shared, of nights survived. During the day, the hearth was many things. It was a kitchen, where broth simmered and flatbread blackened at the edges, where onions and garlic, suspended from the rafters, were brought down one by one and added to whatever stew the family could cobble together from what the Brinden and their labor had provided. It was the light source, casting long shadows across the floor, making the children's faces glow gold as they played with bits of wood and knotted string. It was the gathering place, the center of the room, of the conversation, of the household. Arguments were whispered there, secrets passed between generations, names remembered, jokes told, sometimes songs sung, voices hushed out of habit more than necessity. But at night, in winter, the hearth became something else entirely. It was the guardian. It kept the wind at bay, the frost from climbing too high. It made the difference between suffering and survival, between waking up and not waking up at all. Its light, dim though it may be, was a reassurance that someone had tended it. That warmth had not entirely abandoned the home. It also told the time in a strange way. A pile of high, crackling flames meant the night was young. Glowing coals meant it was past midnight. A single wisp of smoke curling through darkness meant morning was near. The family, sleeping around it in their tight bundle of wool and breath, knew this instinctively. No clock needed, no rooster crow required. Tonight, the hearth casts a halo of warmth onto the dirt floor, just enough to reach the toes of the youngest child, just enough to dry the edge of a damp cloak, just enough to make the room feel less like a tomb. The flames speak if you listen, not in words, but in rhythm. The pop of sap in a damp log, the slow collapse of a burnt branch, the flutter of ash lifting, then settling again like snow indoors. There's peace in that sound, a kind of heartbeat. It reminds the family that they are not alone, that somewhere at the center of their little world, a light still burns. There is a story the grandmother tells sometimes, when the children beg for one more tale before sleep, that fire is a gift from the gods, stolen by clever hands, and given to humans not just for cooking and light, but for companionship. That every hearth contains a spirita, tiny, smoky guardian that watches and whispers and remembers. That if you keep your fire alive, it will keep you alive too. No one speaks this story tonight, but it lingers in the room all the same, in the way the mother laid the logs just so, in the way the father pressed the last stick into place before lying down, in the way the children curled toward the coals without even knowing they did it. The hearth watches them, not with eyes, but with warmth, the only kind it knows, and outside, beyond the walls. The world is ice and wind and quiet fury, but here, inside this modest room of sticks and earth, the fire holds its post, not proudly, not brightly, but faithfully, and that, in the deepest part of winter, is enough. The house is not silent, not completely, even in sleep. The world rustles softly threads of sound that weave through the darkness. a low creak from the beams overhead, the snap of a cooling ember, and beneath it all, the familiar, comforting noises of the animals who share this humble space. For the medieval peasant, home was not just for people. The house, if it could be called that, was often a single room, its walls made of wattle and daub, packed tight with straw and clay. There was no separate stable, no cozy barn in the back. Livestock lived right here, beneath the same roof, not out of affection, but out of necessity. Their warmth helped the family survive winter, and so tonight, like every night, the animals sleep close in the corner. A pig sighs deeply, pressed against the earthen wall. Its great body is still, its breaths slow and rhythmic. Pigs are intelligent creatures. It knows its place here. It knows the pattern of nights and mornings. It knows that this room, this odd, smoky room, is safety. A pair of chickens doze on a narrow wooden beam overhead, their claws clenched tightly around it, feathers fluffed, heads tucked beneath wings. They sway gently each time the wind rattles the thatch. If disturbed, they'll let out soft clucks, nothing alarming, just gentle complaints before they return to sleep. And near the door, a goat shifts, not fully awake, but restless in the way that only goats can be. It murmurs to itself, its breath steaming faintly in the cold. Its hooves clack once on the hard-packed floor, then stillness again. These creatures are not just background, they are part of the family's life, woven into it like thread into wool. They provide food, milk, eggs, meat, when times are dire. They provide warmth, not just from the heat of their bodies, but from the security they represent. They provide noise, gentle, grounding noise that fills the gaps between dreams. In the shadows, the youngest child stirs. Half asleep, he murmurs. The pig is snoring again. No one replies. The child sighs, presses his face deeper into the woolen blanket, and smiles. To him, the pig's snores are not strange. They're familiar, reassuring, as natural as his mother's breathing or his father's cough. Once, when he was smaller, he tried to name the chickens, gave them grand titles, Lady Feather, Sir Beak, Lord Cluckington, but names did not stick. The birds did not care. And now, as he drifts back into sleep, they are just the chickens. The animals don't dream in quite the same way people do, but they have their own quiet lives in the night. Sometimes, the pig snuffles dreaming of rooting in warm spring soil. Sometimes, the goat lets out a bleat, quiet and sharp, then returns to silence. And the chickens, every now and then, murmur in their sleep, a soft, rustling sound, like leaves in wind. And there are other visitors, too. Ones who do not live inside, out in the cold, among the snow and the trees. Wild creatures stir. The night belongs to them, the fox, the owl, the small rustling things that never show their faces in daylight. The fox circles near the house, its paws leaving no sound in the snow. It smells warmth, it smells the pig and the chickens, but it knows better than to come close. There are walls, there is fire, there are humans. It stays in the shadows and watches for a moment before slinking away. Up in the trees, the owl waits it, has no interest in fire or wool or chickens. It waits for motion beneath the snow, for a foolish mouse who ventures out too far. It listens, perfectly still, a silhouette against the pale sky. Even the wild things know this home. They know its scent, its heat, its soft rhythm of sleep. They respect it in their own way. Back inside, the room settles deeper into stillness. The animals shift closer to the fire's remaining heat. The goat nestles into the straw. The pig gives a great final sigh and does not move again. Even the chickens seem to sleep more deeply now, no longer troubled by the wind's touch. And in this strange mingling of man and beast, there is an ancient peace. A shared rest, a shared breath, a reminder that survival in the harshness of winter is often a team effort in summer. The animals will return to the outside roaming pastures, scratching in dirt, grazing freely. But for now, in the thick of the cold, they belong here, under the same roof, beside the same fire, inside the same dream. In a corner of the room, wrapped in a cloak that once belonged to someone long dead, the grandmother sleeps. Or perhaps she doesn't sleep at all. Her eyes are closed, yes. Her breathing is slow, like the rhythm of leaves drifting down a stream. But something about her stillness feels deliberate, as if her rest is not just a surrender to fatigue, but a vigilant, quiet watch kept in the long hours between midnight and dawn. She is the oldest person in this house, perhaps in the entire village. No one knows exactly how old. Age is not measured in years here, not precisely. It's counted in winters survived, in children raised, in stories remembered when others forgot. The lines on her face are deep, carved not only by time but by wind and hardship. The sun has kissed her skin for decades. The cold has bitten it too. Her hands are stiff, her fingers bent in ways that make spinning or weaving a painful task now. But still she spins, still she weaves, because she is what holds this house together, not through strength, but through memory. She has seen everything this home has known, the birth of every child who now sleeps beside her, the first snowfall of a dozen winters, the tears cried after bad harvests, the joy after the good ones. She knows when to expect the wolves. She knows which trees near the stream bloom first. And though she rarely speaks during the day, her voice soft and threadbare, she carries stories inside her like coals that never go out. There is a tale she once told the children long ago, before they truly understood what stories were. It was of a woman who could talk to trees, who could hear their roots dreaming beneath the ground, who knew which branches would fall before the storm came. The children asked if the story was real. She said, "It was, and is. All stories are both." They didn't understand then, but now, as the hearth glows low and the wind scratches against the shuttered window, they remember her voice. Even in sleep, her presence is a comfort, like the fire, like the pig's sighs, like the scent of smoke in their hair. She taught them how to listen to the forest, not just with ears, but with patience. She taught them that bread rises better when you hum. She taught them that sometimes silence says more than speaking. She is full of small wisdoms, things that never appear in books. Not that anyone here owns a book, such as, "Don't chase a cat. That doesn't want you to. Boil water twice in winter. The second boil remembers the first. If you forget why you entered a room, ask the room, not yourself. Never sleep with cold feet unless you want to dream of ghosts no one else understands." These rules, not entirely, but they follow them anyway, out of respect, out of love, out of some instinct older than thought. Sometimes, when the wind is at its worst, she hums a song no one else knows, no words, just a tune, crooked and old and aching. She never sings it aloud, just hums beneath her breath, the kind of sound that would vanish if you tried to write it down. She says it's a lullaby for the fire. Tonight she does not hum, but the memory of her tune lingers in the corners of the room, tucked between the rafters and the shadows. And though her eyes are closed, one cannot be certain she sleeps. She may be listening to the goats shuffle, the low breath of her daughter, the dream murmurs of her grandchildren. Or perhaps she listens to things beyond the walls, the snow's weight on the roof, the echo of hooves far off, the quiet, forgotten voices of ancestors whispering through frozen trees. In the morning, she be the first to rise. She always is, even before the rooster crows, even before the light shifts from indigo to gray. She stir the ashes. She coax the embers back into flame. She check the door. She note which chicken laid and which did not. She do all this without fanfare, without announcement, and when the others wake, it will be as if the house was never truly asleep, because she never truly is. To the children, she is just grandmother. To the wind, she is something older, something the forest recognizes to the house. She is a second hearth, warm, constant, full of memory, and as the cold deepens outside, and the night inches on, it is her silent strength that holds everything steady, not with words, not with action, but with presence. There are many kinds of light in this house: the fire, the moon, and her beyond the walls of the tiny house. The rest of the village lies hidden under blankets of snow and stillness. From the outside, it might look lifeless, like something abandoned, preserved in frost, but the truth is, the village sleeps, not like the restless, twitching sleep of the sick. No, this is the deep, hushed sleep of something alive and peaceful, like a winter bear in its den. The air is so cold it crackles. The wind, which earlier moaned through alleys and trees, has quieted. Only the occasional sigh as it twists around the wooden beams of the cottages, testing shutters and eaves. Then moving on. From the ridge just above the village, the moon casts a wide silver light. It glints off roofs heavy with snow, the thatch frosted to pale gray. Smoke rises slowly from several chimneys, thinner now, cooler signs that fires have been banked for the night. Inside each dwelling, life rests gently in the blacksmith's house. A broad man sleeps with his arms flung wide, still smelling faintly of soot and ash. His dreams are thick and molten, shaped by iron and sparks. Beside him, his wife clutches a small carved charm, something he made for her when they were young, and everything was possibility. In the weaver's cottage, thread still dangles from the loom, the day's last pattern unfinished, but the weaver herself sleeps peacefully, her hands curled like spiders in her lap. She dreamed earlier of a cloth so fine it shimmered with the sky itself, possible, but beautiful. At the far end of the village, where the road curves toward the forest, an old man named Bren sleeps alone. His house smells of dried apples and pine resin. No children, no animals, only silence, and yet he dreams of dancing, always dancing. He has not moved quickly in years, but in dreams, his legs remember the rhythm. Even the smallest of home's huts, barely tall enough to stand upright, contain worlds, worlds of breath and memory, of fears tucked under woolen sheets, of hopes cradled like fragile embers in cupped hands. The village dreams together, though no one speaks of it. They share certain images. A grove where flowers bloom year-round. A lake that glows with fireflies even in winter. A long table set in a field, every plate full, every seat filled. They've never seen these places in waking life, but somehow everyone knows them, and in sleep they visit. There's no need to knock on doors in dreams, no need to ask permission. You simply arrive. Tonight, somewhere in that shared dream, the baker's boy walks beside the butcher's dog. The boy never had a dog, but in this place they are inseparable. The boy hums a song his mother sings when she needs dough. The dog listens, tail wagging, as if he knows it too, somewhere else in the dream. The carpenter's twins ride a boat made from clouds. They fish with spoons. They catch laughter. The dream village is more than a copy of the waking one. It is gentler, softer, still bounded by snow, but the snow does not bite here. It melts beneath bare feet, leaving warmth instead of wetness. In this place, time is slow and kind. The mothers do not worry. The fathers do not ache. The children never cry for food or fear. Even the animals are there, more playful, more curious, speaking in gestures that make perfect sense. The goat from earlier walks on two legs and tells riddles. The pig offers hugs. The chickens sing lullabies, but eventually all dreams drift. Even this one, they blur at the edges. They slip beneath deeper waves. The boy and his dog disappear into fog. The girls on the cloud boat fall backward into stars. The weaver's cloth unravels into birds. The shared dream dissolves, not with sadness, but with a kind of graceful surrender. And one by one, the villagers float further into sleep. Not the sleep of stories or fantasy, but of rest, of blankness, of healing. Their breathing slows. Their limbs go heavy. The world becomes weightless. From above, the village looks like a scattering of sleeping embers. Each house a quiet glow, a small fire kept alive in the vastness of night. A reminder, even in the coldest season, life persists, not loudly, not grandly, but gently. And in gentleness there is strength. There is a moment so brief, so delicate, that it almost doesn't exist. It arrives quietly, just before the first edge of dawn begins to tug at the horizon. The coldest, stillest hour of the night. The time when even the wind hesitates, unsure if it should continue its long, lonely wander across the snow. This is not the hour of wolves that has passed, nor is it the hour of waking that is still too. Come. This is the hollow in between, a breath held by the world, the pause in a sentence before the last word is spoken. And in this moment, the village and all its beating hearts lie still. Even the house that has cradled us all night, the crooked, creaking, beloved house, has grown utterly silent. The fire has dwindled into faint red flickers, buried in the ashes. The room is blanketed in shadows, but not darkness. There is light, faint moonlight, softened by frost, made strange by dreams. The children do not stir. Their breath is light, slow, in perfect rhythm with the grandmother's heartbeat. The goat makes no sound. The pig sighs once, then is silent. Not even the mice move now. In this deep hour, something else seems to hold. The house, not warmth, not memory, not sleep, but silence, not the absence of noise. That would be too flat, too simple. This silence has depth, It is velvet thick and full of knowing. It is the same silence that blanketed the forest when the first trees grew, the same silence that fell when the first fire was struck. It is the silence of the stars as they move unseen above a sleeping world. It does not demand, it does not explain, it simply is, and within that silence, everything rests, not just the body, but the self. Regret curls up and drifts away. Fear goes soft, unarmed. Even longing, that old companion, sets down its burden. In this hour, even time reclines. Nothing moves forward, nothing reaches backward. Everything is now, and now is gentle. If a dream were to form now, it would be a slow one, wordless, colorless, not an adventure, not a story, but a feeling, a wide field, full of snow, untouched, a feather falling, a light blinking far away, seen but never reached, and in that dream, a voice might hum, low, steady, kind, not in words, but in something older, a lullaby not meant for children or for grown-ups, but for night itself, a song to keep the moon company, a melody to soothe the frost. Back in the house, the grandmother stirs not from discomfort, not from need, but as if to acknowledge that hours passing, she does not open her eyes, she simply exhales, long and slow, a sigh older than words, a message to the silence. I see you, I remember you, and the silence, in return, accepts the offering. The walls do not creak, the embers do not shift, the trees do not groan, but something listens, and something, somewhere, smiles. Soon, very soon, the rooster will begin its crow. Light will bleed across the horizon. The frozen eaves will drip. Boots will thud against wooden floors. The day will return with its duties and sounds and laughter, but not yet. For now, the hour belongs to stillness, to hush, to breath, to being. It is the moment before the world remembers itself, and it will pass unnoticed by most, but not by the house, not by the grandmother, and not by the silence, who holds it all like a sleeping child.